podcast, A Penny for Your Thoughts with me, Steve Penny. Over the coming weeks, I'm going to be talking to some great people. I hope you enjoy listening in. Thank you. Thank you, Pamela, for taking the time to talk to me today. I'll be looking forward to having our conversation and seeing where we go. So if you wouldn't mind starting off with a bit of an introduction of who you are and what you do currently, and a little bit about your home life and family, as much as you're willing to share, and then we'll go from there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Steve. And kia ora koutou. My name is Pamela Bell tōku ingoa, and I am the Chief Executive Officer, or the Chief Everything Officer, as I like to think about it, for the New Zealand Institute of Building. And for those that don't know, the Institute of Building is a membership association, a lot like the Master Builders or Certified Builders, but instead of being for organisations, it's for individuals. Mm-hmm. So it's all about the people. It represents about 1,300 individuals, and they're people who have jobs or roles and positions between the design and build function. So they're delivering complex commercial construction projects and multi-res projects. So they're design managers, site and construction managers, project managers, digital managers, cost managers. You get the picture.
I get the picture, yes, for sure.
So I personally started life through an architecture degree, career life that is, and I went on to work in architecture practice for a few years before going back to architecture school to do a master's on prefabricated housing in New Zealand. It was called Kiwi Prefab, and out of that came an industry association, a book and an exhibition at Pokiariki in New Plymouth. And PrefabNZ had a life with myself at the helm for about 9 years until it became part of, government vernacular, became part of what Kāinga Ora, former Housing New Zealand does, and became part of what Fletcher Building does in terms of setting up their Clever Core factory. So I decided to pass the rako at that point in time and went consulting, innovation consultancy for 3 years, and have been at the Institute of Building now for about 18 months.
Oh, wow, okay. So relatively new in the role then, really, if it's only 18 months.
Yes, I do feel like I'm one of the newest members there, and it's been a really great journey in terms of getting up to speed with, I guess, the past, the present and the future of where the Institute's at, because it's just been having its 40th birthday this year. So I've landed at a celebratory time, which has been a lot of fun.
40 years, that's quite a history, I guess.
Yes, there's a lot in there, from a very voluntary, rootsy beginning through to the more professional institute that it is today. Yes.
Okay, that's excellent. So personal circumstances, you obviously have a daughter, as you just mentioned before we started.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm the mother to two teenage girls. One is just about to be 17 and is learning to drive, so I'm sure people out there can empathise with that. Yes. The other one, 14 and very sporty, and will possibly interrupt us at some stage. And I live in Poriki, in Wellington, and the children are with me. I'm a divorcee of 6 years, and so the children are with me half time. And the things that we do together are, we do a lot of skiing, we do a lot of staying at remote beaches and caravans, and we enjoy our time outdoors together.
Nice. Sounds fantastic. Yeah. Excellent. Well, I've got two daughters myself, so I empathise with the two daughters thing. That can be quite challenging.
Absolutely. Sure. They're complex human beings, but I'm very lucky. Yeah. My two are fabulous, and they're both very different, so I'm very lucky.
And I've actually got 3 children, and all of them extremely different. So it's always a journey having kids. I think you find out a lot about yourself as much as you do about them on the journey.
You're absolutely right. I think some of these personal challenges can overshadow work and career challenges, and we don't bring them to the fore enough, actually, when we discuss the situations that we're in and the complexity of our lives. So I think it's always good to acknowledge that everyone's got some crazy stuff going on.
That's certainly what I found with these conversations that I've been having for the since April of this year, is that there's a lot of people out there that have got pretty challenging lives, and you wouldn't know to look at them that they were going through the stuff that they're going through. So I think you're right. We do carry around a lot of stuff that we don't necessarily share all the time. So it's good to have a forum to start sharing some of those challenges we all face. I think you started off on the route of being an architect. What was the decision-making process behind that? Why did you go that route?
Okay, so I was one of those kids that I'm sure others can relate to, that enjoyed playing with Lego, enjoyed playing with dolls, in as much as I liked setting up their houses, and then, game over. So, and I enjoyed drawing little spaces. I enjoyed drawing caravans and boats and the insides of houses inside mushrooms, or I don't know what. But anyway, that was my space that I inhabited. So architecture seemed to be the natural thing to go into. And of course, it's this lovely blend of challenge between art and science, isn't it?
Yep.
To me, it's a real space for human-centered design thinking and strategic thinking is the way I think about it now. But at the time, it was just the most challenging thing I could think of. And originally, I was going to do a double degree with business as well. And that's really interesting because I tried to understand more about the architecture business I was in, but that was a bit of a closed shop. And talking about business in the architecture space is a bit of a no-no. Certainly, the first week at architecture school, they say, if you want to make some money, get up and go now. And if you've got any flatmates or halls of residence people who are studying law, get, sidle up close to them because you're going to need them later on. So they say all these things, to scare you a bit, but then they really never talk about the commercial or the business aspect again. And I think that's a failing of the system. There's a bit of professional practice, but certainly myself and some colleagues, we set up something called Design Thinking Business, which is a course run through Victoria University in collaboration with Tulo. So it's available to people outside uni, which is a 6-week online course which talks about business terms, entrepreneurship, design thinking, design sprints, basically all the options that people that study architecture and design have got other than just going into a practice, right?
Yeah.
Because there's plenty of people who study architecture who end up doing other strategic or business or design-centered work.
There's a lot of project managers that started off as architects as well, I found.
Project managers, design managers. And I think in countries like Italy, architecture as a degree is much more like how we treat a BA or a law or commerce, and that it's a good fundamental degree.
Yeah.
It would certainly create a whole legion of wonderful clients, I imagine, who are empathetic to the design process. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So in terms of your career progression, you had a few different roles, but always in the construction sector?
I had a small break in my architecture degree for 7 years where I went snowboarding, and I did snowboarding to as far as I could. At that time, it was in the 90s. It was quite new. So I was influenced heavily by ski racing. So I was doing snowboard racing for work, if you like, and then freestyle for fun, or free riding for fun, more like it. So I did World Cups and I went to the Olympics in 1998.
Oh, wow.
I was the first Kiwi to go to the Olympics. It was actually the first time that snowboarding was at the Olympics.
Okay, so that's the Winter Olympics. So where was that? Where was that one held?
That was at Nagano in Japan in 1998. Okay. Yeah, and then we've had snowboarders.
I've got to ask, how did you get on?
On the day, I was one of the people that did not finish. So in skiing and snowboarding, 1/3 to 50% of the field do not finish, which means, you've slid out on a gate or crashed. I had one. Yeah, it was a really fantastic experience, and it was unfortunate that happened in that race because I'm usually a very safe racer, but I put everything on the line for that one. But it was an amazing experience, and I was very, very lucky to be there.
Well, congratulations for getting to that level where you're competing for your country. There's not many people that do that, so that's a huge achievement in itself.
Yeah, it was a cool experience. I met lots of awesome people, and it was just a really fun, innovative time for a sport as it was kind of coming to its maturity, I guess, in terms of World Cup and Olympic acceptance. Yeah.
Is that the only time that you were competing at the Olympics, or you must have done other competitions prior?
Oh, I did about 3 years of World Cups around Japan, North America, European countries. Yeah.
Successful period of time, would you say?
Oh, it was great. I had a couple of, I guess, good results that are worth mentioning, which is once I won the North American Border Cross Championships. So Border Cross is like motocross on the snow, with bumps and berms and gaps and stuff. And it's a speed event. You've got to get out in front. Yeah. And then I had a top 10, I think, in the World Cup finals for slalom in Italy at one point. Yeah. So those were highlights. Definitely. But at the end of the day, it was just all about the people. There was just some excellent human beings involved. Yeah. So it was a fabulous way to explore in my 20s. And I did go back to architecture school. So
And you did after that. So you had 7 years snowboarding and then went straight back to architecture.
I did, and I was very lucky they let me back because I didn't remember much from the first 2 years. So I then had to jump back in third year. Yeah, so it was great, and it was fabulous to get back into the architecture space.
So what would you say to date has been your biggest professional challenge?
My biggest professional challenge? Well, I love challenges. I'm absolutely drawn to difficult things. So that is a tricky one. Look, I would say I had a period of my life, and it would be a time management period, after finishing my master's on prefabricated housing in New Zealand, which was called Kiwi Prefab that I mentioned before. I didn't know what was going to happen next. And so I set out a couple of grant applications through the university, Te Herenga Waka, Victoria University. One was for an exhibition and one was for a book. I was really sure I did not want my master's which at that point looked like an old-fashioned phone book. Remember the white pages and the yellow pages? I just didn't want to put that on a shelf and walk away. So I wanted to turn it into something digestible. So I made applications for grants for that exhibition and for a book. And then at the same time, I ran a little seminar to test that my findings were not just Pam's thoughts, but were actually credible at an industry level. And I went to the CEO of BRANZ and the head of research at what was then the Department of Building and Housing, which is now MBIE, and they both supported me in running that seminars. And I developed a whole day of programming, so it wasn't just about my research. And all the people I'd done first-hand research with, from Kaitaia to Wanaka, I had 140 people turn up. So it turned into this big thing, and I was very carefully coached, I would say, by those people I mentioned before, to ask the question at the end of the seminar, so do we need an industry association to help bridge the gap between all these innovative products and processes that are happening in the construction industry and the people that specify them? And the people in the room said, yes, we do. And then we said, who wants to be involved? Because we have to have a steering group, which then became the board. 5, 6 or 7 people put their hands up. And then they turned to me and said, and will you do the work? And of course, I hadn't thought about that at that stage. I was just trying to get through the day. But at that stage, I had a new baby and a toddler, and I was, doing a bit distracted at lunchtime and stuff. So, so that's when PrefabNZ got born, really. And then it became an incorporated society. So the difficult challenge that I've taken a while to get to is that both grants were successful, and I had 3 things happening at once. The startup of PrefabNZ, the book getting started, the exhibition getting started, and then I had a baby, a toddler, and a husband at home who just lost his dad and was deep in grief and depression. I would say that was the hardest time of my life.
That's not just a professional challenge. I'd say that's an everything challenge, really, isn't it? Wow.
It is an everything challenge. And if you heard me laugh a little bit then, it's because the cat that's purring in the background just nipped my wrist.
Cats are like that. Cats are generally, I describe them as psychopaths.
I'm with you.
They can be very friendly, but they can also turn on a sixpence and rip you to shreds if you're not careful.
They are on their own program. I'm with you there.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely. Okay, so you've obviously achieved quite a lot from what you've said already, but what would you pick out if you had to pick one thing that's your proudest achievement so far? What would that be?
Oh, look, I find that stuff really hard because I'm a bit of an achievement junkie, and I really like setting slightly crazy challenges for myself and then trying to knock them off. So how about I talk about the one that is happening at the moment?
Okay.
So I'm at the Institute of Building, which I think is fascinating because it's got this 40-year history. But as it admits itself, it's a collection of 1,300 individuals, of which most are mainly middle-aged white men. And so the wonderful... And there's nothing wrong with that as a great foundation and a starting point. And we are in the construction industry. So my wonderful challenge is to bring in some diversity of age, of regions, of ethnicity, and of gender. And that's alongside some fresh thinking around how we do innovation. And the real challenge is how we encourage young people to eventually become life members. But it's more than that. It's how do we encourage young people to understand the value of real life connection, coming to site visits, being part of networking events, learning from older, wiser, experienced people, so mentors. So that, for me, we call them next generation, obviously as a society we label them as Gen Z, etc. But I think this is a conversation that we need to have as a much broader industry and a community, which is how do we help our young people turn up in person to university, to vocational education, to get life experience on job site.
I think that's a challenge generally for society, because I think we've become very disconnected because of the advent of social media. So we'll spend more time talking to somebody in messages on social media than we will actually talk to people face to face. And I think there's a real risk we run of losing the art of conversation.
I agree with you completely. So do we need to teach communication and conversation and how to meet people in real life, or are we just all adjusting to living in a virtual digital world?
I guess my view on that is that we are by nature a social species. We live in groups on purpose, and having the ability. I mean, certainly I see a lot of engineers who do not know how to talk to people.
I think that's really interesting, because I think you've essentially hit on the how do designers and builders talk, and of course engineers are in there as consultants as well, but essentially how do we all talk? Because sometimes I think the Institute of Building exists with its membership base between the design and build functions, because design and build can't talk to each other. So they have to have all these other people in the middle. I know that's a very simplistic way to think of it.
Well, yes, the communication styles are very different. Most of the engineers that I know are very comfortable when it comes to things like spreadsheets and designs, calculations, and expressing that information in a way that other people can understand it. They really struggle with.
Yes,
like writing a report in English that makes sense is beyond a lot of engineers.
Yes,
they'll write in engineer speak, which only another engineer is going to understand.
So I think you've just hit on another really important aspect of inclusion or diversity. It's not just age, region, ethnicity and gender, it's the neurodiversity, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're all on quite different ends of that spectrum between creative thinking and analytical thinking, and sometimes we just need to translate from one to the other. Maybe AI can help us do that. Certainly writing emails is like the fastest way to get someone's back up if you're not speaking the same language.
Yep.
And we could probably do that much better.
They're easily misinterpreted, I think.
I absolutely agree.
You can read an email and take entirely the wrong intent out, and it results in a very bad relationship that is only going to go in one direction, unfortunately. And I think I find it frustrating when I have people in my team that would rather send an email than pick up the phone.
Well, this is also a generational communication skill, isn't it?
Yeah, it is to some extent, for sure.
Yes,
yeah, and it's certainly something that throughout my career I have found that talking face to face is the best way to get the best outcome.
Yes.
Electronic communication is hugely convenient some of the time, but it rarely gives you the best outcome.
Sure, as long as we have a way to kind of recap the actions and understand who's doing what as a result, right? Yeah. Otherwise, it's just meeting upon meeting upon meeting. And it's amazing with video technology that emails aren't coming to us as video snips, we're not replying with video, right? But maybe that will change in time. The other aspect I'm interested about, because there is some research grounding to this, is when I was working as an innovation consultant, I worked for the distillery around a piece of work for the Accord, the construction skills strategy, but we called it the people strategy, construction people. And that found that there were 3 key steps for the construction industry, in terms of skills uplift. The first being how we behave, how we treat each other. The next being how we learn, meaning more digital in our pocket on the job. And the third being what we learn. The what we learn bit's easy. We know we've got to learn more about innovation, green, carbon counting, better, more efficient, productive ways to do things, right? And staying relevant. The how we learn is changing, and it's a really big beast to change that whole vocational education system, as we're seeing right now with the reshaping, the road reforms, the Te Pūkenga setup. And I'm involved on the board of something called ConCOVE, which is the Construction and Infrastructure Centre of Vocational Excellence, which is a way to kind of address some of the research around vocation that BRANZ doesn't do as mainstream research. But the fundamental piece is what you've been talking about with communication, is how we behave, how we treat each other. If we don't sort that out, we're not going to attract anyone into this industry, and we're certainly not going to retain anyone.
Well, I think that the diversity issue there, it's the construction industry has been predominantly male for as long as I can remember. I've been next year, unfortunately, I've been working for 40 years and
I wouldn't say unfortunately, I'd be proud of that.
It feels like a very long but what I was going to say is that there's, throughout that time, the level of diversity in construction is really limited.
Yes, I think we're at about 12 to 18%.
Yeah.
And less so on the tools. It's about 3% on trades. Yeah. Yes.
And that comes, one of the things I think that stems from is that it's not university level, it's actually at school level, where there's still a lot of direction that women do certain jobs and men do certain jobs and never the twain shall meet. And that approach needs to change. One of the things that I tried to do at one of my previous businesses was actually get in to talk to high school children before they were making their decisions about what exams they were going to take, because we were finding that by the time they've got to university, it's too late. They've already decided what they're doing, and you miss out on a huge swathe of candidates because they didn't even know there was an option.
You're right. And I think that research that BCITO has done has shown that it's the influences, the family members, the whānau, the friends and family that are creating the non-legitimacy of construction as a choice. I think what's as much of a concern is that it's being painted by entrenched, perceptions as a trade that you go to when you don't have other choices. So at a time when we need digital literate, technology-focused, intelligent, hardworking young people, it's typically seen as a place to go if you don't entirely know how to read or write. And that's coming up in the fact that we've got massive literacy and numeracy problems in the construction industry. So we're not just teaching carpentry, we have to be teaching right at the basic fundamentals.
All the STEM stuff,
Yeah, well, pretty critical when it comes to measuring and cutting, for starters.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there is a perception around engineering. I mean, I'm speaking about engineering specifically because that's where I sit. But there's a perception that engineering is what you do when you take, the person that you take your car to is an engineer, and the person that fixes stuff is an engineer. But there's such a wide range in what we do as engineers. Everything from designing planes through to designing the access control system that lets you in your building, and I don't think people really appreciate the diversity there is in the roles that you can take. And
I agree.
There's a lot of lessons to be learned there, I think, and we're not very good at promoting the industry.
So maybe one of the questions is, how do we become more mainstream in that way, or not mainstream? Maybe we need to use more social media and influencers, and some people are doing that to much better effect than certainly I am or the Institute is doing. But I think also maybe as an industry, we need to take some responsibility. We need to tell the stories. We need to involve our children and their friends in our work that we do. We need to invite them in. One of the things we've done at the Institute in celebrating 40 years, and I'm interested to see what you're going to do next year in celebrating 40 years. But one of the things we did is a series of events called 40 Good Deeds. And we gave our Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch regional committees pretty much open slather. Do something good, make sure there's 40 of it. Yeah. So the Auckland team chose to create a bus site tour for 40 young school students.
Oh, nice.
And so, they took them to working sites, they took them to a first factory. So there was a number of So that's just obviously a drop in the ocean. Yep. And it was incredibly hard for them to get young women involved. So where we went wrong or where the messaging went wrong at the school's end, I'm not sure. But we just simply have to keep trying, I think.
Yeah. On that subject, when I was working for ACOM, I spoke to Burnside High School and I said to them that we've got a group of really successful female engineers working in the business, and we're really keen to speak to the girls at Burnside about what their opportunities might be in that field. I got everything arranged with the school. They apparently did publicise it. The ladies that were working at ACOM with me went along to the event, and there were 3 girls in the auditorium. Mm-hmm. Out of a school that has 600 students. Only 3 actually turned up. Now, I don't know whether that was the school not promoting it properly or whether the girls were just not interested, but it highlights an issue that if you want to get more diversity into this industry, it has to start right at the early stages.
Absolutely.
Because there's just, otherwise we're just going to end up with the same selection pool as we've currently got. And, I mean, I find when I'm recruiting that the 90% of the CVs I get are from men.
Yes.
And
so
it's
there is a lot of layers of messaging, isn't there? One of the good things for when people are in the industry is there is a great organisation called NAWIC, National Association of Women in Construction, and I've been the inaugural chair of the council there, which has been great, and still involved in other ways. So that is a way to belong and connect and find places of support in the industry. And there's lots of chapters all around the country, and they run events. It's all run mainly by volunteers at the moment. And the incoming president, Colleen Upton, is a fabulous woman. She is at Hutt Plumbing and Gas. She has her own plumbing business alongside a couple of other directors, and she would be really cool for you to talk to on a podcast, Steve. Colleen Upton.
When I'm looking at doing other, I've got a series that I've just recorded. I think I've got one more to record on actually next week, which is focused on sustainability. And I've got sort of a few sort of global people involved in that conversation, and plus quite a few Kiwis are also involved in that conversation. So trying to promote sustainability and
awesome,
because I think it's misunderstood what sustainability actually means.
It really
a lot
is,
of the
isn't
time.
it?
Yeah, and I'm just trying to promote that, but I'll be very keen to look at other things. I'm looking at doing shorter, like 6 or 7 episode series on different subjects.
Cool. Well, Colleen Upton is a great force for change. She can speak a lot about vocational education and the impact of the changes on plumbers, but also about women in construction. We had her at the Institute of Building come talk recently in Building Legends Insolvency Fundamentals about her experience in insolvency situations, of which the personal side of that is so interesting. That's where you really do all the learning rather than just the legal and financial sides. But 2 women in the sustainability space that I'd love to mention to you, Steve, one is Jane Henley. She's currently working with the Construction Sector Accord, heading up their innovation work stream. She set up the New Zealand Green Building Council in New Zealand, and she also then went on to lead the World Green Building Council from the head office in Canada. But I'm happy to share her details. And awesome, yesterday, I was at the Architectural Designers New Zealand conference here in Poneke, Wellington, at our beautiful new convention centre, Takina, and on a panel conversation alongside Antonia Reid, who is the woman that heads up the Building for Climate Change section at MBIE. So that's the policy side of it, which is obviously
be good, actually. That's
obviously the stick, but we need to kind of get ahead of the curve, don't we, with our understanding of carbon.
Yeah, we're pretty much failing on every metric at the moment on our targets that we've set as a country. You look at what we've signed up to do under the various different accords, and we're missing our targets by a long way. And a lot of the time I think there's a bit of apathy around climate change in New Zealand. We feel like because a lot of our power is generated sustainably, that we're doing all that we need to do, and it's so far from the truth. It's a bit of a frustration of mine that we could do a lot better than we are. So one of the reasons I wanted to focus on that sustainability is exactly that, to just try and open up people's eyes a little bit to what's going on. But I would certainly be keen to catch up with both of those ladies. Actually, if you can send me their details, I'll get in touch with them and see if I can get them to come and talk to me.
100%.
That'd be awesome. Thank you. Next question I have for you is, who would you say is your biggest influence in your life?
Oh gosh, that's a toughie, isn't it? I'd have to say my dad. My dad passed away in 2015, but he was a man who was quite interested in innovation. So he got involved he trained as an engineer, you'll be glad to know, civil engineer in Canterbury, your neck of the woods. And he was in the computer industry when it was fun, he would say, and in the telecoms industry when it was fun. He was involved with the Southern Crossing cable that helped get the internet here for us. And then he really found his straps, I think, working for himself. So he worked for big corporates his whole life, and then he did that lovely midlife thing where he fell in love with a wonderfully smart CEO who was the first female partner at KPMG, and together they set up an organic vineyard, as you do, and he worked for himself. And honestly, he was not happier than I've ever seen, like went on a tractor. He was absolutely himself. He was really a farm man at heart.
Yeah.
But look, he was really inspiring to me because he was delving into those innovative industries ahead of the curve. And that's the stuff that really interests me. But look, there's so many people that inspire at different times of your life
There is,
for all kinds of different reasons.
Yeah,
and sometimes we feel so alone. Sorry, you go.
I was going to say, I feel the same, that there's been probably 4 or 5 key people in my career that I would say are people that have really changed my perception in some way, that they've said something or done something or shown me something that alters the way I think about what I do. And I think those are the people really that are the most inspiring, that they've got a different perspective on things, and they are able to engage with you in a way that leads you to change your perspective sometimes, which is, it's important for all of us to accept that there's more than one way to do things, and having those different perspectives is really important. And that's where the diversity thing comes in as well, that if you've got different people around the table, you're going to have different perspectives on how things are done. It's good to challenge the norm, isn't it? There's a risk that we slip into the ease of doing what we did last time because it's comfortable and it's safe and we know what we're doing. But that's the way that innovation dies.
I think it's really good to acknowledge where we do get that energy from to keep going and to keep testing and trying new things. I think sometimes when you're trying to be a bit bleeding edge, disruptive, transformative, challenged, definitely the space that I like to play in, you can feel a little bit on your own, but it's good to pause and acknowledge all the people that help along the way. I know that's helped me in reflecting on snowboarding to go, oh, that person helped me with that contract, that person helped me with that. I mean, you're never entirely on your own, but it can feel, that's what I was just starting to say before, it can feel sometimes like it's just very you lonely against the world. But I was listening to Roger Walker, the architect who's now 80, address a conference today, and he had this lovely thing to say, which is, life experience is hard because you receive the test first and then the lesson second. You kind of get spat through the mincer first, don't you? And then you come out and go, oh yeah, that's what I learnt. Yeah,
and I think I guess that's another thing that, I have been in this industry for 40 years, but I'm still willing to learn. I think that's important. But, there's lots has changed over my career. When I first started, computers didn't exist. Everything was done on a drawing board and a typewriter. And that the level of change I've seen just in the tools we use is absolutely staggering. But it's more, there's all sorts of things that are changing all the time. Our focus on how we build buildings and this, the systems and the process and everything else are always changing. If you're unwilling to acknowledge that, you make yourself extinct to a large extent. You become irrelevant.
Absolutely.
That's the last thing anybody wants, really.
And Catherine Hall, who heads up ConCOVE, was just saying yesterday in the panel discussion I mentioned that it's absolutely about what you're saying, vocational education, small v, small e, just learning all the time on the job, isn't it? And we were talking about transformation and disruption, and of course this is actually just our everyday lives. This is just coming to work every day and doing one little thing slightly differently. It's that additive, incremental innovation. That's how change happens. Absolutely, and you're right, it's that learning mindset, eh?
Yeah, definitely, for sure. Yeah. So what about outside work? What do you do? Because you're obviously a very busy person. What do you do to recharge your batteries?
Oh, look, I'm just like anyone else. I'm just a sucker for Netflix and a good book and a lovely cup of tea. I watch lots of terrible Netflix to recharge. I enjoy exercise. I love fresh air. I enjoy a bit of mountain biking or hiking or whatever my body can handle. I love hanging out with my kids, doing that kind of stuff. I'm very much like anyone. I know when I have to put the brakes on and go do some yoga and just breathe. But I love hanging out with my I've got fabulous friends, lots of wonderful girlfriends, and really enjoy traveling for work and catching up with friends all around the place. So
Okay. Lots
lots of normal stuff. Steve,
Yep.
probably the same stuff you enjoy.
Probably. I think we all, I think that socializing side of things, I think is something you don't realize how important it is a lot of the time. And, the ability to go and meet up with somebody and just share your day, even if it's been a terrible day or a good day, just share that experience, and how much energy that can give you, just having somebody else listen and be part of what's going on is
it's huge. Downloading.
It's huge. Absolutely.
Having
definitely.
friends. And that's also a little bit of what we could learn from Māori culture too, is a little bit more whakawhanaungatanga, like at starting a meeting by checking in with how people are really doing, what else is going on in their lives, and just the big picture, because we bring our full selves to work, and it's just about being a bit more authentic, isn't it?
Yes. I think there's a misunderstanding that you can leave your home life at the front door of the office and you leave your work life at the front door of the house, and it doesn't actually work like that. And I certainly, you running your own business as you have, me running my own business, work and life are combined. There's not a separation between the two. And I think that I've heard somebody recently told me that they think of things in terms of a work-life blend rather than life balance. And I think that's a more realistic way of looking at it, that you need to get the blend right at either end. When you're at work, just bring in the right amount of home stuff, and when you're at home, bring in the right amount of work stuff, because that's how life is. It's you're one person with one set of experiences, and that those experiences go across your entire life, not just one part of it. And it's important to acknowledge that, I think.
For sure. And I think we all have tricks and tips for doing that. One of the things that I was told when I had newborn babies and Plunkett comes to visit you at the house is they say things like, oh, you need 7 social interactions a day to keep your wits about you, right? And you go, wow, 7, that's a lot. But one could be a phone call, or it could be a text with a friend, popping down to the dairy, whatever. So that helps you realise. And I know when I did 3 years of consultancy working from home, I had to make sure I was getting a balance of online meetings. And luckily I live in an apartment building above a cafe. So there's you go downstairs and have real life interactions, or you make sure that you've got meetings out and about and events to get to. So you do have to really look after yourself and be quite deliberate about that and plan that stuff.
I mean, one thing I found very tough for me was that when we had the first lockdown here in New Zealand during COVID, and the fact that we weren't allowed to go and see anybody, because my job for the last 20 years has been very much a social job, going out and talking to people, going to meetings, having coffees with people, building relationships has been part of what I do every day. And having that taken away,
relationship industry,
it is, and having that part of it taken away was really tough. So I ended up organising a number of Teams meetings with people, not because I wanted to talk to them about work, but just because I wanted to talk to them.
100%. Yeah, I've still got some kind of interaction. WhatsApp groups called something wine club. Yeah, exactly. That are from COVID. Or something book club, but there's no books involved.
Indeed, yes,
exactly.
Indeed.
Yeah, it's super important.
It is important. And now looking at what you've learned over your life, if you could go back and meet your 20-year-old self and give yourself a piece of advice, what would that advice be?
That's really hard, because the 20-year-old me really had very little self-confidence, and the only way I got that was through the hard knocks and lessons and the things learned, like Roger Walker talked about, through my 20s. I don't think it was until I was 30, and by then I'd been to the Olympics and got my architecture degree, that then I had some idea of confidence. So I think that's one of the magical things, though, about getting older, isn't it? You grow in confidence, or you give less of the proverbial. So things just get better and better. I think what gave
you learn
me
to
support,
filter stuff that you wouldn't otherwise not have filtered.
Not to sweat the small stuff, but also because your life is so complex, there's so much going on, so you can't actually really worry too much about one thing. But I think in my early 20s, I read something by the Australian feminist, whose name's just escaped me, but she said something to that effect about how awesome it was and liberating it was to be older and all that. And I had a lovely relationship with my grandmother, because she would just look in the mirror and go point blank, look, sometimes I just look in there and I'm like, who is that old lady staring at me? She was just totally honest. And I love
Yeah.
that because she kept that absolute verve going until she was 99, so that was cool.
I think that's, I mean, it is hard to think. I mean, one thing I would say is if I wouldn't want to change any of the experiences I've had. That, there's been good and bad stuff, but all of those experiences have been something I've learned from, and I wouldn't be who I am today without them. So the idea of going back and changing something,
yes,
I don't think it's a good idea. But it's kind of that sort of thing that you have to think about it, because there's a lot of lessons you learn that at the time are really difficult to get through, and just hearing that maybe you do get through them and it is going to be better and all of that is kind of probably the thing that I would sort of focus on, saying that it's not as bad as you think.
Every experience shapes us. Every lesson shapes us. Exactly. Look, my 16-year-old said the same thing as what you just said then, Steve, the other day, because of course sometimes I lament that the divorce and the following 6 years impacted the children in ways that were undesirable. And I think I learnt from the Seth Godin quote, good decisions can have bad results, or bad effects or bad outcomes. So this was one of those examples, really. But she said, look, she wouldn't be the person she is today, the resilient person she is, if she hadn't gone through those downs and then ups and learnt how to cope. So it's formed the amazing young woman that she's becoming now.
Well, but it's
hard to pause and be grateful.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I think there is. But the fact that she's mature enough to recognise that is a compliment in itself, really, isn't it? That, you've obviously given her the tools that she needs to see life experience in a positive way rather than a negative way, which is amazing for a 16-year-old.
I think our young children are so much better at talking about mental health. I mean, I know there are a few tag phrases and things that they kind of latch onto, but certainly there's things that she's brought up with me that I've been like, well, don't you just like toughen up and move on? And she's been able to try to educate me about how, actually, these are actually mental health issues and we should be developing ways to deal with them. I
think that's, certainly one of the things I don't regret it, but I'm very aware of is the reputation particularly men have for saying, I'll toughen up and drink some concrete and all that kind of stuff when people are really struggling. And it's something that I personally am trying to be a lot more open about, because I've struggled with depression, 20 years probably. Only really diagnosed about 5 years ago, and I've been on medication for the last 4 years for my depression. And I talk about it all the time because it's a real thing, it's a real sickness, and without dealing with it, I would probably be hiding in my room under the covers, not wanting to move.
Normalize that. Talk about it.
So it's just part of who I am, and I made a post on my LinkedIn about it, and before I did that, Chrissy, my wife, was saying, I don't think it's a good idea because people are going to think you can't cope with stuff. But I said it's more important than that. It's more important than that to me. That if people think like that, then I probably don't want to work with them anyway. Because
this is interesting because we have this kind of binary measurement in society, don't we? Something's good or bad. We judge it. You win or you lose. And that's the thing I really struggled with the Olympics is, go about medals, or actually it's not. It's about participation. The Olympics is actually philosophy of sport being part of your life and all this stuff. But I am reading this awesome book at the moment by a British feminist author, Caitlin Moran. She usually writes about women, but of course the conversation or the rhetoric was always, she was asked about men. So she's written this book called What About Men, which one of my men friends has given me to read. And it's actually fascinating as a woman to understand how different it is for young men in terms of learning to communicate or not, and the resulting effects later in life. So it comes back to that construction conversation about how we behave and our strong skills, which get called soft skills, but I think I've heard the term strong skills given, and I much prefer that because these are tough skills, communication skills.
Being open and vulnerable is scary.
100%.
It's when you've grown up in a society that says men are the ones that look after everybody else, and men are the ones that protect everybody else, and men are the ones that never cry. To admit that you can't cope is terrifying, because you'll be seen as weak and everybody will say that you're a failure, and that whole attitude is is why 75% of the people that kill themselves are men.
It is, and it's really important that we have this conversation around the complexity of construction, around the current environment. I was just in a meeting yesterday where one of my, I chair a board called Urban Plus, which is the Hutt City Council social housing provider and developer and management, tenancy management. And one of our board members couldn't come because a colleague had just committed suicide, and he was someone in the construction industry whose business had become insolvent. And we are starting to, we know this happens. We know this is the personal human toll of having low margins in a cutthroat industry with combative procurement principles. So it's something that obviously mates in construction literally flies the flag for. But it's something we all need to be on board with. We all know someone. I mean, my former board chair at PrefabNZ, Gary Caulfield, is someone who is dearly missed, who has suffered the same fate.
It's something that, I mean, it's something that happens way too often and construction does seem to be a particular focus, because I think it's because it is a male dominated industry, but also it's because of the attitude, which is that, you know, we're big tough builders, we can do anything kind of thing, that hides a lot of stuff that's going on and makes it difficult for the people in that industry to ask for help. And you know, it's quite scary.
I agree. And it comes back to that fundamental construction skills strategy building block that we talked about before, the how we behave, the how we treat each other. We have simply got to make small incremental changes in that space and be more people focused, even if it's just brushing up on our HR skills, or, you know, finding a different way to phrase something.
Being present is the other thing. You know, look, when we're busy, it's easy to sort of barely acknowledge the others around you. But, you know, the time it takes to say, hi, how are you? And actually listen to the answer and actually interact in the conversation, that doesn't take a lot of time. But I think we're very much a society that wants to move on to the next thing all the time.
Well, we feel pressured, don't we? And we're under deadlines, and our procurement practices are set up to obviously incentivize being fast. But you're right, we need to take the time and listen. And I think what's interesting is what a few of our members are doing. We've got members at First Principles Construction and Aotearoa Construction here in Punaki, Wellington, who are utilising high performance sport coaches. And we've got a chat with Mark Watson at Sofrasign coming up soon through the Institute of Building to help us get our mentors ready to do a mentoring, what we're calling our mentor mix program, which JIB is getting behind. So I think it's really interesting to see where these first movers are using high performance sport coaches to essentially coach their team members to develop some of these how we behave, how we treat each other, strong skills, communication skills. So they're understanding that, and they're investing in it inside their businesses. It's
excellent to hear, to be honest. It's long overdue, I think, across the industry. So
often they're people that come out of sport or come out of the military, actually, come out of the Defence Force.
Well, I mean, that's one of the things I've noticed is there's a lot of people. I mean, military is seen as being a lot of really hard and tough people, but from what I've seen of people that are now using the skills they learned in the military to coach, most of them have got a lot of those soft skills, the empathy and the understanding and the ability to manage different people in different ways. That's all come through their military training, and it's sort of an unexpected outcome, because you expect the people that's in the military to be all about macho-ness, but they're not, because they've recognised a while ago that there's different ways to deal with people and different ways to get the best out of teams and the best out of individuals. And I think there's a lot to be learned from that. It's
huge. And that's certainly something I experienced with my snowboarding competing, is when you get to a certain level and everyone's of a similar physical ability, and it's obviously a mind game from that point. And we couldn't access sports psychology or any training until we were right up, but just because of the structure and the way the funding worked. So we had to do most of the sports psych stuff ourselves, in terms of our own research and investigation. But that's massive. And the thing that I really remember from all that is a book I read that I won't be able to remember the name of, but I remember that what it did is it made you set goals before you went into a race about what you wanted to do and the process, like not the outcome, right? You can't affect that, but you can affect the process. You know, I'm going to be thinking about these 3 techniques or whatever as I'm in the starting gate. And it also made you pre-think, how am I going to feel if I don't achieve or do the things that I am setting out to do, right? So it made you kind of preload or pre-think your self-acceptance, because of course I used to find this frustrating with skiing and snowboarding. People would go through the finish gate and then be like, oh my God, that was the worst run ever. And they're all kind of saying the same thing and being self-denigrating and stuff. And that's pointless. So this was totally getting you to think, okay, how am I going to feel if I don't actually do those things I've set out to do? And, you know, we all work now in the construction industry at such a rapid pace. It's not perfect. We're continually delivering work that might not be up to our own standards, but we are trying to hit the acceptable minimum viable standard. But we do need to think, you know, what happens? How will I accept myself if this particular project doesn't go the best way possible? Yeah.
And I think there's the large part of that, again, is the communication, isn't it? I think one of the things I've certainly found is that clients will accept delays, they'll accept changes if you advise them early enough. If you wait until the minute that stuff is due and say, we're going to be late, clients find it hard to deal with that. But if you give them enough notice and say, look, these are the things that's happened. In order to get to the quality we need to get to, we need an extra few days or weeks or whatever it may be. And you let them know well before the deadline. Generally speaking, clients will say, okay, thank you for letting me know. Yeah, that should be fine. And it is communication. It's keeping them informed about what's going on and giving them the opportunity to make a decision. Like they could say, well, actually, look, let's get to as far as you can by the due date, and we'll accept that there's stuff still to be done after that, but we need that information for another reason. And they can make that decision. If you don't tell them until the day that you're not going to issue anything, they don't have that opportunity. And I think that, you know, we as an industry, our communication is pretty average.
I think that's a great example of using transparency to build trust. And because we're a relationship-driven industry, you know, we're nothing without trust, aren't we?
Absolutely.
And of course, I've heard the phrase, you know, you can only change only moves at the speed of trust, right? Yep. So everything in our industry boils down to relationships and trust.
Yes, it really does. Yes, I want to change topic a little bit now.
Cool.
You've obviously travelled a fair bit from the conversation you've had. Is there somewhere that you've never been to yet that you really want to get to?
Oh, yeah, that's a really easy one. But first I'll preface it with 2017, myself and my former husband took our 2 young daughters on a 7-month trip around the world. And on reflection, we were really lucky to do that pre-COVID. And we all chose somewhere we wanted to go. We went through South America, we went through Mexico, we went through Central Europe. I got to go to Barcelona, which was my choice, and everyone else got their choices, which was awesome. We went to the Galapagos, we went to Lake Titicaca, and we went to Paris.
Not jealous at all.
Those were our 4 personal choices. We went very slowly and economically. Don't worry about that. And I was doing PrefabNZ work 10 hours a week along the way. But on reflection, I decided I'd love to go back to Spain. So my aim is to get back to that lovely triangle of Portugal, south of Spain, and Morocco, because I'm mad about colour and I just love all the tiles and decoration. And so that's the place that I want to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Have you been?
I've been to I've been to Egypt, but I've never been across to Morocco. I do want to get to there at some point. Chrissy, my wife, and I have a plan that we're going to, when we do stop work, we're going to retire and buy somewhere to live in Italy, and then we're going to spend our time travelling around Italy and the rest of Europe and North Africa and other places. You know, we thought about travelling from here, but it's too far away from here, to be honest.
Let us know where you end up and we'll all come visit.
Absolutely.
My retirement plan is to buy one of these beautiful VW Green California campers and just travel around the country and stay at all my friends' retirement houses.
Sounds good to me. Sounds very good to me. Excellent. So what else do I want to ask you? Yeah, if there's somebody that you could actually meet, whether that, you know, whether a historic figure or somebody more modern that you'd really like to meet and have a conversation with, who would that be?
Just one person, huh?
Well, you can have 2 or 3 if you like. Have a dinner party. Have a dinner
Oh,
party.
yes, I love the idea of those dinner parties. Oh, look, so many interesting people. That's really tough. I mean, you'd have to have a crazy musician in there, like a David Bowie. You'd have to have a fundamentally incredible politician. I'd need to have Jacinda Ardern, Barack Obama. You'd need to have you'd need to have Gandhi and Buddha. I mean,
Yep.
just
A
the
good,
full
eclectic
gamut.
range of people.
I think it's a vegetarian dinner.
Right. Sounds very much like it is. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And is there why do you think that sort of, again, you're looking at diversity there, aren't you? You're looking at a wide range of very different people. Is that, I mean, that's obviously something that's very core to who you are.
Well, there's thinking. There's kind of social broad kaitiaki, thinking about the globally, about the planet and the future for us. This last election's been quite confronting for me. I know this is not a political podcast, but I'll tell the quick story in terms of my father. I watched him work for corporates, vote National, then realised that there are human beings out there vote Labour, and then as he got older and had grandchildren and started working the land, vote Green. So I've watched the life cycle of a person engaged with the world and their political thinking, and I get very concerned that we're all a little bit too insular, thinking about ourselves and our own gains, and potentially could benefit from thinking more about other people.
Well, one thing that I've realised, and I hadn't noticed the change as it happened, but I've realised of late that as I've gotten older, I've got more and more socialist in my views. That I've gone from being somebody that's only focused on me and my family and my career, and to somebody that's now starting to think about what we're doing to the planet and how we're treating one another and those other things. And I don't know, I couldn't point to a time when that change was triggered, but it's certainly something I'm very aware of now, and it's kind of driving a lot of the decisions I'm making. Is, am I doing the right thing? Not just for me, but for those around me as well. And I think that there is a lot of politics that is all about the person and not about the society. And there's a lot of division across everywhere. Whenever you look in the world at the moment, it's all about division. And, the politics is all about division. It's all about one extreme or the other extreme, and there's no meeting in the middle. And you're either with me or against me. And it's horrible to see what's going on, to be honest.
Yes, and looking outwards, I think to the other countries in conflict, we feel very lucky to be in Aotearoa, New Zealand. But I think what you're starting to talk about is, and it's the same at the construction industry level or at the nationwide level, which is there are strategic areas that we can all agree on. We want to have less of this or more of that. So there are bipartisan or cross-political party strategies or policy statements we could agree on. And then the parties could just take a tactical, well, this is how we'll do it. At the moment, it seems like we shouldn't have to relitigate a nationwide strategy every 3 years. That just doesn't make sense at all.
No,
and
again,
the construction industry needs a holistic, housing and construction.
Politics has stopped being altruistic a long time ago. I think that's part of the issue. It's not, you people that go into politics now are going into it because they're going to get something out of it, rather than because they want to make some change. A lot of the time,
it can feel like that. I think there are some great shining stars. I'm very, very impressed with the likes of people like Chloe Schwarbrick, who are obviously incredibly intelligent, speak concisely and with great knowledge and fact-based. But I'll be completely honest, Steve, politics is not my wheelhouse. But
we should stay away.
I have children, so I'm very interested in the future of the globe.
Absolutely, definitely, yes. Okay, so just to close things out here, have you got what is considered to be an unpopular opinion?
Have I got an unpopular opinion? Well, I'll tell you something that has just turned up recently is it seems that my slight dislike for kale has turned out to be unpopular with people who are close to me. So that's something I'm grappling with at the moment. Is, do I really need to discover a joy in the kale vegetable? My general thought is no, I don't.
No, I don't.
But that's an unpopular opinion in some
apparently,
camps.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm struggling myself at the moment. I'm slightly in the diabetic scale, unfortunately. So I'm trying to avoid eating carbs and finding bread alternatives that are carb free. Most of them taste like plastic. They're really unpleasant, and I don't want to eat them.
No, well, that's helpful, isn't it? Are you in the rice noodle space?
Well, that I'm actually not supposed to be having carbs at all, really. I'm trying, because carbs become an issue for me.
Well, so, it's all kale for you from here on out.
Yeah, pretty much. My future is looking very kale.
Good luck.
Well, look, I don't want to keep you too much longer. I think we've had a very eclectic conversation. We've gone into a few different places, and it's been great to hear about your life up to now. And I'm, look forward to catching up with you again at some point in the future. I'm sure we will. So I just want to say thank you very much, Pamela, for taking the time to talk to me today. It's been really great.
Thanks, Steve. It's been a pleasure talking with you. I hope you have a fabulous weekend.
Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to my podcast, A Penny for Your Thoughts, with me, Steve Penny. I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation, and I look forward to sharing my next conversation with you in the future. Thank you.